Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a lead fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. Every week, I get to interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. And today, I'm really excited for this conversation. You know, someone that's done quite a bit with sustainability, even with a very reputable set of facilities. And I've got Sheila Sheridan with us. She's an IFMA Fellow, and she's out in the Bay Area, actually, out in San Francisco. But definitely, we're going to learn about what she did on the East Coast there when she was at Harvard University as the director of facilities. So, Sheila, how are you doing today?
Great, and thanks for having me.
And I know really for the last 18 years, you've also had your own consulting firm, and we'll get into that. But I ask everyone, take us back. You know, where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Well, Charlie, I probably still have a little bit of an accent from Boston.
You do?
I grew up in Boston, and I went to all Catholic schools until college, and it was a teacher's college. And from there, I went to BU to get my master's as a media specialist school librarian because I loved books and thought that would be a good teaching avenue. I then went and stayed home as a domestic engineer, I called myself, with my boys and volunteered. And when I finished with volunteering, I suddenly realized that I loved administration. And so I decided to go back to school, and I went to Harvard University's Extension. And because I had a teaching degree, to get a business degree, you had to take other courses to build up to the business degree. So they had a certificate in special studies and administration, which was 8 courses that allowed you to say you had a year towards an MBA. And I have to say, I enjoyed learning all of the different types of courses that they availed to me to take. Because fortunately, as a Harvard employee, I was able to take those courses for free.
Oh, wow. What a great place to get some free courses. And so then tell us about that shift to maybe, facilities, right? Where did that show up? And then later sustainability. So, you're getting this business administration, you're getting this continuing education, advanced degrees. How did facilities come into the picture?
Well, it wasn't known as facilities back then.
Okay,
as
sure.
I say to people, in 1980, when I returned to work after being a school teacher and the librarian, I decided I wanted to be in administration. And it was basically, and I remind anyone I talk to, volunteer work allows you to test the limits of your abilities. And there's no repercussions. In a sense, you're not fired.
Sure,
so I still tell people today, volunteer and learn what you are really interested in and do it. And you meet wonderful people within that process. I met mentors within that process. So having done volunteer work, I realized I wanted to go into administration. Now, Charlie, back in the early 80s, people would look at me and say, "You're a teacher. You need to be home in the summer with your children." And I would say, "They're not going to be home for long." Yeah. And I really want to do this. But it was interesting back then. You really ran up into barriers concerning certain areas because of people's perception of what the role of a woman was.
Wow.
So I then decided that I would try to be an executive assistant. And it was 1980. Remember, there were no such words as sustainability and facilities management. They asked me to move in. It was an NGO because my goal was to be in an NGO and become a director. I felt very strongly about the nonprofits. And so they asked me to move the office to another building. They had renovated the building. And so my department that I reported to the VP of PR and administration, within 3 months moving to the new building, the president and she came to me and said, "You are the most organized person I have ever met. Will you please straighten out this building?" Well, it was like, why not? This sounds like a real challenge. And so that's how I kind of, flowed into that position. But I'll remind everyone again, there were no courses. There was nothing. So you kind of existed, but then at the same time, you had to go search out information. And that was one lesson that I learned very early on. One, admit you don't know, and then ask the different people who do know for their help. Yeah. And so that's how I grew within that position.
Wow. Thank you for showing us how you got into that position and the barriers you had. And you're right. We didn't have programs like LEAD. That didn't come till really the year 2000. So in the 80s and maybe 90s, was it more about energy efficiency? Like, what was your first stab at sustainability as this role grew for you?
The first one was an interesting one, Charlie, because, of course, the Kennedy School of Government was their mission and goal was, to train leaders for the future in government and also other issues around the world. We had a very famous faculty member who had actually been in the administration, Carter's administration, and he was running the Institute of Smoking, or managed it. He was the head. And he sat me down and he said, "I think we should be a no smoking building." And I thought, well, I don't smoke. Now, Charlie, this is 1986.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, most of my department smokes and all of the facilities vendors smoke. This is going to be a challenge. And I learned some lessons there that I took with me as I went through other sustainability projects. The first one I'll share is that you have to match your project to the mission and goals of your organization, because you need them to buy into it. And if it doesn't match, then why would they do it? The second thing was to invite people to participate, not demand, but say, this is something that the school is looking into, where you participate. And I always told people that you need to invite champions, naysayers, and very especially, Charlie, the gossipers. Because companies all have gossipers. And so what better way to control gossip than have those types of people involved? They never knew that I considered them that. And then the other thing that was really important before I invited people was financial. And having gone through the CSS program for the business, I realized it was very important to consider behavioral implications. And if anything, the financial wasn't the problem with the non-smoking. It was behavioral implications. And so that had to be something that I felt had to be measured. How many people smoked, how many didn't. And also, you needed to invite other people to participate beyond your committee, HR, because all of a sudden you were changing the way people work. And so that moved, it really led me to believe if you tell people what you want and explain why and ask their opinions, they buy into it. If you tell people what to do, you're telling and not sharing. So I learned that was a very strong lesson for me. And then at the end, of course, I had to do a report. And I always, from then on, did a financial report and a behavioral implications report. How did this affect the people that existed within the building? And then the very last thing was you had to celebrate. So that first project really set the tone for when in 1988, I did recycling. And then in 1988, the school was going to build a new 109,000 square foot building.
Oh.
And I was going to be on the project team. Well, Charlie, I got really excited because I thought, I had been reading about sustainability. Remember, I loved libraries and research. So I had, of course, technology wasn't what it was today. And I thought, I can do some sustainability projects. And also, I had been involved with looking at direct digital controls for energy conservation. And back then, the big word was interoperability, which isn't even a topic anymore, which meant everyone in the smart controls business had a proprietary program, so they couldn't talk to each other. And so all over Harvard, you had all these different proprietary programs. So I got involved in that because I was director of facilities for 3 buildings at that time. The 4th one being built, I wanted them all to talk to each other. And so that building opened in 1990 and was very successful. And from then on, I did other energy. The big one that really, I think, impacted people at the university think about was the EPA green lights. Now, I don't even know if you know what it is. It was 1992. You might have still been out hitting a baseball or something. And then the government had said that they really thought people should be changing out their lamping to save energy. It was an energy program. And considering it was the School of Government, I had read about it. I thought, well, we should be doing it. Our lighting was from, the building was old. It had, been built in the 70s. And so this was an opportunity to relamp, not just that building, but the other ones. And so I went to the university administrators of all the other buildings. We had monthly meetings with the VP of administration. And I said, I would like to do green lights. Would you like to do this with me? Nobody would do it with me. They weren't interested. So I said, okay. The tenaciousness in me said, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. So we went to the EPA, the VP and I, and said, how about the Kennedy School just do it? It's in our mission and goals. They said, fine. And so we did that program. And out of it came something that I'm very proud of. And I didn't realize this until about 4 years ago when I was texting or emailing with the executive director of the Sustainability Executive Program, Leith Sharp, at the Chan School of Public Health. And I was writing her about circular economy. Back then, money was tight. And so I had to look for funding for the Green Lights program. And at that time, the U.S. government said, we will find third-party vendors for you to work with that will also provide a loan, a low-interest loan. And I looked into it, and then I called the university's finance office and said, we're the wealthiest university in the world, and I have to take a loan out and pay interest on it. Don't you think there's something else we can do better? Well, they thought about it. And I said, how about we set up, which is now was called then the Research Conservation Initiative Program, RCIP. And that was established in 1993 for this program. And what it was a $1.5 million was placed in a fund. And then we, as facilities director, could approve energy saving projects of each other if they thought it was worth it. And so I had the no interest loan, and it was paid in 3.5 years. Well, Leith wrote me and said they had kind of disbanded it, but then in 2001, they brought it back. And now it's the Green Loan Fund, and it's enormous, and it's supporting all of the different schools in various ways to commit to climate change and sustainability. So I've continued, to do sustainability as a volunteer also.
Sure. You had to pave your own way and you were just figuring it out. And I love the tenacity. That's a great word. And I see that and I hear that through you, Sheila. Did anyone, though, maybe mentor? Sometimes a mentor is someone you look up to, you don't have direct access to. Maybe it could have been Amory Lovins back in the day or something, or maybe over here it is someone that did help you maybe in your career. I don't know. Where were you going for counsel? Anyone you could call a mentor along the way?
Well, I have to say it's a group, Charlie, because it changed the direction of my career. As a domestic engineer and volunteered during the time my kids were growing up, one of the groups I joined was the League of Women Voters. I felt very strongly about government at that time. And it was the 70s, mind you. Rent control was a big issue in the city of Boston. And so the League was looking to study it and come out with a consensus, which is the way the League works. And so I volunteered to be on that committee. And that's where I learned to, one, research with the facts, and two, how to present them clearly so that people would understand them and be able to make a decision. And so the culture of that developed my self-confidence, and there was always someone there. But the thing I remember most, Charlie, that I carried with me, and I still carry with me, is one of the older Brahmins, and Massachusetts Brahmins are Bostonians that have been there for years, pulled me aside after I did my first presentation. And I knew of her, but I hadn't met her personally. And she said to me, I want to share something with you. Remember that when you're presenting information, if people are questioning you, they're questioning your information and not who you are. And I realized I brought that through my life, remembering if I provide information, and I always try to do two, when I present choices, I usually try to do two, that when people are questioning, it's not me they're questioning, it's my information. And so the League probably changed the direction of it changed the direction of my career.
Well, that's some wisdom there. I love that. To all our listeners, make sure you go back and listen to that again. Thank you for that. I mean, that just makes sense. I think that's one of the biggest fears, right? Public speaking, and it's not an attack on you. It's the information, and I love the option. So, all right, so as you look back one more time, what are some of your proudest accomplishments?
Well, I did see the resource, in our CIP group, it became the Green Loan Fund. I think one that I reflect back from teaching is I taught in 1963, the first year of busing in Boston for a school. It was diverse. It was very different from what I had been trained to do. And a couple of years in, the school district decided that maybe there needed to be a new way of teaching because of the diversity of the population that we were teaching, especially reading skills. And so they put in and they received a government funding for an individual performance plan, which was, I was part of the group that helped design it. And what it was, we looked at the range. It was kindergarten to sixth grade. The first to sixth were being bused. And so we looked at the range of reading scores and decided that perhaps we needed to recognize individual difference and then maybe put children in the appropriate area where they should be for reading. And so it was very successful. As a fourth grade teacher, I had a second grader all the way up to the sixth grade, 2 hours a morning for reading. And so that really changed the direction in teaching a lot within the Boston community of recognizing diversity. And of course, it taught me as I went through in my career that we need to recognize individual differences and meet the people where they are. Don't drag them up to where you are. Meet them where they are and help them get to a next level. So that was the teaching one. Two other ones. One, is as IFMA chair in 2002, excuse me. I was chair 2002 through 2004. I said I wanted it to be the year of sustainability. Well, Charlie, sustainability really wasn't known that well. I heard through the grapevine that they were going to let me do it, but then it would blow with the wind. Well, I have to tell you, it was received with such delight, and people were coming up and saying, yes, we need to do this. We need to do this after my chairman's speech. And so it started to come into, but what I tell people is I just ignited what was there. They were waiting for someone, and I seemed to be the person that ignited them to realize that they could make a difference through their profession. And so in 2007, there was the Sheila Sheridan Award created for sustainable facility operations and management. And this past year, Global IBM, Workplace and Technology, along with CBRE, were awarded the Sheila Sheridan Award. So, that's pretty special to me. And I think the other thing that I feel that is finally coming awake again was when I was chair and traveling around the world, there were a lot of countries, especially China, that we visited. There were different levels of facilities management, and nobody was talking to anybody really. You'd meet them at an event or you'd sit, but there was no bonding. There was no feeling of we're doing this together. And to me, I knew sustainability had to bring us together. So I was one of the founders of Global FM. And what it is, an association of associations who do practice facilities management around the world. And it kind of lay dormant. It was there. And then all of a sudden, when sustainability and climate change really reared its head, all of a sudden people came together again and said, this is a way we can share what we're doing concerning sustainability. So so a few things still exist today, which is nice.
That's legacy. And what I've heard in our conversation so far, Sheila, it's just beautiful, is leadership. You've had so much leadership you've learned. And then, some people follow someone because they have to, and then most hopefully because they want to. And I think you've had a lot of influence. And to me, that's the definition of leadership. Okay, so if I get it right, if I'm looking at your bio, maybe 2004-ish, 21, 22 years, retired from Harvard. And, so how was that? And really just the last 18, as it shows on your bio, teaching again. There's the teaching coming back to, and speaking and consulting. And so tell us about that transition. Where'd you leave things? And, how's it gone in retirement here, but consulting, speaking, for the last 18 years?
Well, basically, I had discovered that I liked teaching again. I had been on the U.S. Green Buildings as vice chair for existing buildings in their second revision. And I had really found that was really going to make a difference in what was happening out in the built environment. And so I had been asked if I would consider teaching. I also had been teaching for IFMA, the CFM course too, which I enjoyed. And I guess the word that I used before is to ignite people's interest in doing something better and making them realize they can do it better. I mean, sometimes people will say, yeah, that sounds good. But if you say, I know you can do that, you just need, some help and understanding. So I had discovered I enjoyed teaching. My husband had retired, so he was home. So there was the pull of that. So I started teaching mainly for U.S. Green Building Council because at that time, the existing buildings version 2 had just come out. And then they started doing some work on schools. And I thought, that's really important to me. And then I also was asked to be a visiting professor, which was very intriguing. One was in China, in Hong Kong. And it was all on sustainability. Their personalities were so different from the U.S. One of the things that I came away from was the intensity of what they believed in. And they felt quite comfortable in believing in it. And then I was at Kufstein in Austria, was visiting too. And again, I found that sense of the young people just wanting to be better and change what was happening, both in facilities, but also somewhat in sustainability. And then the interesting thing was that I then went to Pratt and taught Kufstein and Pratt students together. And I tell the story when I was it was a day long, they were there for like 6 hours. And so after about an hour and 20 minutes, one of the Kufstein students came up and said, "Aren't we ready for a break?" And I thought, oh, the European way, they're waiting for a break. So that was something that I really had to adjust to, was that their sense that learning wasn't as intense in a way that we pushed it all into the forefront, but rather we relaxed and we came back. And I started to thinking about that maybe for learning, you need to step back and absorb, and then you come back refreshed. And I think sometimes we as adults don't let our minds refresh. And I have this 24-hour rule that if something's going on, I'll go, I know my gut says to do this, but maybe I just need to step back and look at it a different way. And so everyone that I've worked with more or less knows my 24-hour rule. But I think more of us need to do that. So then I was on a few boards, and actually the VFA board, which has been bought up, has now been bought out, and BASF. So I spent some time working as a participant on a board, and my main role was to bring sustainability and the understanding of it into the companies. And I'm really proud of VFA because they really started to grasp what it meant, sustainability. And we had they had come in and did an analysis of the buildings, of what types of repairs they needed and the services and everything. And so I worked with them designing the report that I wanted, and they really liked that. And Charlie, one other thing I had forgotten about too, that I think I'd like to share is when the project for the new building was happening, I was very fortunate that the different contractors would listen to me, and I would give suggestions. And I was really concerned about indoor air quality at that time. In 1988, no one really thought about indoor air quality much, and also the materials that were being used. So I had done a lot of reading about it. And so if you remember how I always said, invite people in, share information. As that new building went up, I sent out newsletters. Of course, we didn't have computers back then, telling people where we were and what was happening. And I focused a lot on sustainability types of issues. For example, the carpet is in the warehouse being aired. It's rolled out. It's outgassing. And people were really intrigued by that thought. The furniture was blanket wrapped. We're using plants, but I can't afford to support plants. Can somebody adopt a plant? So people adopt taking care of the plants. We reduced the footprint of offices. We did a lot but during that whole project, we let people know what we were doing. We informed them. And so this is the end of the story. I meant to say it's a proud moment. I was told that we had the most expensive HVAC system at the university of a building that had ever been built per square foot. Remember tenaciousness? I thought, I'm going to get you on that one. So I decided to do a post-occupancy evaluation. And here I am at a IFMA event, and my ears pick up, and there's a professor from MIT talking and a Fulbright scholar, and they're saying, oh, post-occupancy evaluation. I said, oh, let us talk. And so we did a post-occupancy evaluation. Charlie, out of 10,000 buildings, that had the highest rating of indoor air quality, also of other types of things. Ease, there were operable windows. And so what I came away with again was that we just need to educate the tenants, the people that live in the buildings, instead of paying attention just to the contractors around a table. We need to reach out and educate the people that are going to be housed in there.
You were early in the healthy building movement, which is now just in the last 7+ years, right? Fit well, a pandemic, and look at what you did there. And I think you proved them wrong. I think there's a pretty big ROI on people, not just saving some energy. So bravo. I'd love to ask this next question. What's next? What do you think's coming at us as this green building movement evolves?
Well, 2 years ago, I really discovered more about circular economy. And I have been active with the ESIS group, which is the IFMA Environmental Sustainability Utilities Stewardship Group, concerning that. And we've teamed up with the Workplace Evolutionaries as a team to look at circular economy. And quick story, Charlie, that made me come to this. When I was doing the EPA 1992 green lights, I was looking at life cycle cost of light bulbs. And I had 2 options with mercury. One was to throw it in the landfill, or 2, to have it incinerated. And I thought about it and the thoughts of, why would I want to put it in the trash? And I know it's going to cost more money, but it's the right thing to do. And that made me aware of life cycle cost as I went through my career. So circular economy was like the gate opening. There's no more worries about how are we going to dispose of materials. And to me, at this point in this climate, we need to do this. But I have patience because I know it's going to take a long time. I will be tenacious in doing this, but I know we have to educate people. And we're in the stage of educating people. There are vendors out there, Charlie, that are now doing it. They're starting to realize Philips, actually, you can rent their light bulbs now and they take them back. There's recycling of carpet. So it's starting, and I think it will continue. The other thing that I think I see, and I know I believe in it because I've seen it in my career, is that you're going to see more associations coming together and cooperating. We can't do this alone. We can't stop climate change without working together. And the same with countries. And I think the new thing that's come out of the UN, which is the sustainable goals.
Yeah.
I think there's 17 or 18
SDGs, you're right.
And I think you're hearing more about that. I believe, and I have enough knowledge that I think the Europeans are ahead of us in this. But there's a lot of talk in China and in the Asian countries about ESG also, which is another whole area that's developing. So to me, CE, I think, is critical because of the life cycle cost disappearing. It's just going to continue on a circular method. I think the union's SDG are going to become more ingrained in our community. And I believe in time, the associations are going to realize they'll have memorandums of understanding, but they might need to go beyond that. And other than that, a new one that I just heard about, which I'll throw out because it really piqued my interest, is regenerative farming. And in 2023, our government will be looking at the Farm Bill again. And every 8 years they do it, which is really stunning that something like that is only done every 8 years. But as we look at the world, sustainability has no borders, Charlie. What I do here, can cause something else somewhere else. And so I'm a believer that we've become environmental stewards, each and every one of us, that we need to support what's happening out there. And even if it's just by donating or volunteering. And so I believe we need to have more volunteers reaching out and helping to educate the people why people look at climate change and just go, I can't do anything. Well, it's about time we start educating them that they can do something.
Oh, so much wisdom in there. I love the sustainability has no borders, and you're still really tapped in. To our listeners, I second all of the trends you're seeing and still getting excited about reading up on. There's a lot of opportunity in front of us, but we have to work together. I wholeheartedly agree. Let's get to know you a little more. Some rapid fire questions. Sheila, what's your specialty or gift?
Oh, I think I'm always willing to look forward and not backwards. That I'm always thinking of how to make things better.
Yeah.
Tenacious.
It keeps coming up. And I love that.
Yeah.
When you look forward, it almost forces you to look to a positive future, right? I mean, I think human nature, it forces you to stay in a positive mindset. So I love that, looking forward and being tenacious. Do you have any other good habits or routines you could share? You mentioned your 24-hour rule, but any other just good habits?
I think harking back, it's a habit, but it's something I do teaching both adults and children, is that you meet the person where they're at and respect where they're at in their knowledge and be willing to share with them. I also sometimes see people shut down when they're talking to someone if they think, you're of no value to me. Every human has something to give, and you don't know how you'll affect that person when you walk away. So I always have, when I'm dealing with people, and I enjoy meeting people, I also enjoy learning from them because I've always found they've piqued my interest or they have something that I haven't even thought about. So I am reflective in that sense, but also I like my quiet time, I have to admit.
There's nothing wrong with that. Thank you for sharing. I'm a fan of a bucket list. Sometimes it's adventure, travel, write a book. I don't know. What are one or two things on your bucket list?
Well, Charlie, since I'm 80 years old, I've been pretty lucky doing a lot of my bucket list. The last one, as I turned 80, was that I wanted to go to New Zealand. And so I've been to Australia a few times. And so my husband and I are going to Australia and New Zealand in February and March. And my other bucket list is just to enjoy volunteering and doing it for the fun of it, for the knowledge, but I don't want responsibility. Does that sound a little bit, but for with ESIS, I keep, I'm sharing my knowledge. I'm sharing information on how I've done things, and I support the committee, but I don't want to lead it. I want to force younger people to step into roles that I can support them. So I want to be an environmental steward continuously. I never want to stop that. And I want to find ways that help other people join the group.
It's very encouraging. Thank you. Is there a book you might recommend to our listeners?
Yes. And I got to know this author through the Circular Economy Committee, which she actually is so ingrained with it now that there's actually a Circular Economy Institute and a certificate. And her name is Lisa Whited. And she's written a book, Work Better, Save the Planet. It's on Amazon. And it's for business leaders with a vision who value employee happiness and the planet's future. Note, Charlie, I said employee happiness because I think hybrid work really relates to that. And I think that's an issue, Charlie, that we haven't fixed yet. And there's a lot going on that, how do I put it? I feel the workers aren't being listened to enough. And that's why they're walking. And from my experience with building that building and listening to people, that's why it was a success. And so I think hybrid work is always going to exist. And I think Lisa in her book talks about it and shows the way. But I will say, Charlie, that's the thing I worry about most is with one of the emerging trends, which is pro-tech, real estate looking at how they manage buildings and the people in it, that we don't lose the voice of the people that work there.
Wow. All right. We're going to put a link to that book. Make sure everybody listening checks it out in the podcast show notes. You're right. We're going to be careful of that. The last two questions here, Sheila. It's been amazing. When you look back on your career, is there anything you wish you'd have known earlier in your career?
No, I'm not a regretter. I think teaching helped me prepare myself for teaching adults. I think my education went with the times. I mean, you were supposed to be a nurse, a nun, or a teacher. And at that time, I thought about being an engineer. I will tell a quick story. My mother was a very good mentor, and she felt I was very good in math and science. And so I went to a prestigious university, not Harvard, to look into the engineering school. And I remember I was only 16. I went to school young and 5 feet tall, very small. And I'm sitting across from the dean of engineering, and he looks at me and he says, I have 3 women in this whole school of engineering. And he said, you're cute, you're young looking, and I don't think you'll survive as an environment. He then said to me, also, you would need to take a lot of other courses to prepare to come into the engineering school. You might have to spend an extra, half a year prepping, because I had gone to an all-girls Catholic school where you're supposed to be a nun, a teacher, or a nurse. So, and I went home to my mother and I said, I'm not ready to do that. Now, Charlie, what did I end up doing? Working with engineers, supervising engineers.
I love it.
So I think it's mainly because I was proactive in a sense that I wanted to learn and I understood. But that's the one thing I kind of regret, but then I don't.
Wow. You showed them, you broke down the barriers in your own ways. Last question. Let's say someone's listening to this podcast and they're inspired by your story. Any words of encouragement for them as they jump in to the green building movement?
It's not the green building movement anymore. It's Save the Planet. And everything you do, both at home and at work and in your profession, can make a difference. Right down to picking up a piece of trash. Now, the green building movement is exciting. It's a vehicle to get you where we need to be. And there's such opportunities for you to be a specialist. And I was called a Renaissance woman on a magazine cover. And I thought, why am I a Renaissance woman? I think we need more Renaissance people. That you're a generalist. And then when you need to know something about prop tech, you dive into it. Then you dive out. So be broad-minded. Take an opportunity when something piques your interest to dive into it. Look at it. Maybe it's something that you can contribute. Don't be linear. The trail wanders and have fun wandering.
What a conversation. Sheila, thank you. You've inspired me. And I hope all of our listeners, make sure you check out Sheila on LinkedIn, shoot her a message, let her know what you thought of this. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for spending time with us and for all of your encouragement. I know others that recommended you call you quite the mentor, but I'd call you that tenacious pioneer and the things you had to go through to do what you've done. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much, Charlie, for letting me tell my story.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.